Joining us is a business investment consultant, Olayemi Akonde, to look at this issue as the MPC sets MPR at 14% for the year. Thank you for joining us. Good morning.
Thank you so much for having me.
Nice to see you.
Okay, now, Nigerians thought that eventually, after the MPC committee meeting, that MPR was going to be reviewed downwards. After the promise earlier by the CBN governor that it was a possibility before the end of the second quarter of the year. So it came as a shock, really, to many. But did it come as a shock to you as well?
Not quite. Okay. Yes, so we can see that there's a positive growth in the economy. Forex is kind of stable. Interest rate is now low. Inflation rates has come down. Yeah, perfect. It looks like a perfect time for the MPR to actually come a little bit down, at least. But then we have to note that CBN might just want a level of stability. They just might not just want to pull the plug right now by reducing the general MPR down from 14%. And you can see in the actions that CBN created intervention fund for a Greek, where they can actually assess funds at interest rate like 7%. There is there's the aviation fund, there's the manufacturers fund. So they picked different sectors and created different kind of interest rates, which is way lower than the MPR just for them, in order for the economy to be stimulated bit by bit. So when they can get it sector by sector, then they can now choose to reduce the general MPR from 14% downward, but not right now. They still want stability. I mean, we just got out
this issue as the MPC sets MPR at 14% for the year. Thank you for joining us. Good morning.
Thank you so much for having me.
Nice to see you.
Okay, now, Nigerians thought that eventually, after the MPC committee meeting, that MPR was going to be reviewed downwards. After the promise earlier by the CBN governor that it was a possibility before the end of the second quarter of the year. So it came as a shock, really, to many. But did it come as a shock to you as well?
Not quite. Okay. Yes, so we can see that there's a positive growth in the economy. Forex is kind of stable. Interest rate is now low. Inflation rates has come down. Yeah, perfect. It looks like a perfect time for the MPR to actually come a little bit down, at least. But then we have to note that CBN might just want a level of stability. They just might not just want to pull the plug right now by reducing the general MPR down from 14%. And you can see in the actions that CBN created intervention fund for a Greek, where they can actually assess funds at interest rate like 7%. There is there's the aviation fund, there's the manufacturers fund. So they picked different sectors and created different kind of interest rates, which is way lower than the MPR just for them, in order for the economy to be stimulated bit by bit. So when they can get it sector by sector, then they can now choose to reduce the general MPR from 14% downward, but not right now. They still want stability. I mean, we just got out of recession last year, and inflation, if you call it inflation, because I don't think that's even inflation, because we are at recession and prices of goods were going up. So it was more like imported kind of inflation, dollar-based inflation. So, but we seem to be out of it. But are we really absolutely out of the woods? So I think, yes. So I think CBN is just trying to be very careful. So let's pick for instance, so there is the Agro Intervention Fund, because they know that if there is issue of no food, then we're going back to importation, and we're going back to putting stress on the Forex, and back to the square one again. So they're just trying to motivate and stimulate the economy sector by sector. And once they get it, I'm sure the interest they will bring it down.
All right, this MPR, the monetary policy rates that we all, for 20 months now, it has been on the same stable spot for that period of time. But let's look at it further. How important is even the MPR to the growth of the economy, if we have to analyze from that perspective? Okay.
Well, and this is just my own view, though. I feel MPR is just a rate that signals the pulse of the CBN. Okay. Right. So once it's tightened, once it's increased, do you have this impression of the economy, this impression that CBN is trying to take control of the economy? Maybe there's so much currency in circulation, which is also one of the jobs of CBN. And when they relax it, you feel that, okay, CBN, the pulse is, they are comfortable with the level of currency circulation in the economy. So I think MPR really is just a signaling rate. I don't see it really having so much impact on cost of borrowing. because like you said, 20 months has been 14%. Within these 20 months, we've seen T-bill probably gone to 22%, 18%, it's gone down to 14%. So that means the MPR is really not determining the cost of government borrowing fund from public. And if you look at it, case of commercial banks, right, it's very weak, is a weak indicator to the kind of rate that a commercial bank is going to borrow out, for instance, the private sector, because now a commercial bank typically has two general kind of customers, the private and the public sector. So I think things like perceived risk level and liquidity play more part in determining the kind of rates that will be on the fund that is borrowed out by a commercial bank as against MPR. So perceived risk, the government is there, the private sector is there, of course. Private sector is perceived to be more risky compared to government. So if the government comes into the economy or approaches a commercial bank, naturally they will provide loan to the government than the private sector. So at that point in time, the government is crowding out the private sector. So the private sector will have to pay more, irrespective of what the MPR is saying, to actually access such loans from the bank. Then if you look at the level of liquidity, when there's so much liquidity in the system, of course, the central bank will come selling T-bill to mop up this excess, and they can choose to give out this T-bill at any rate. It doesn't matter what the MPR is actually doing at that point in time. So if they are bringing up a T-bill at 18%, 22%, and you as a private sector comes to them, you should know you're going to have to pay more to actually access this kind of fund.
Yeah, but the thing is, once you set MPR, it means that all other lending rates would be above it, because the MPR somehow sets the bed, and no commercial bank would lend any customer below the MPR rates, and most usually local loans. Some of the interests are as high as 20%.
I agree with you.
Some 25%.
Yeah.
So that's,
like
that's the risk.
At the time, even
that
30%.
Yeah, so that is why many were hoping that if the MPR is reduced at least, it means that commercial banks too would be forced to reduce the rates of their own loans, the rates on the loans.
Okay, like I said earlier, okay, so 14%, they won't go below that, okay? But there are other things they will put into consideration apart from MPR. That's my point. So MPR is a weak determinant of what the interest rate would be. For instance, that we charged by a commercial bank to private sector. The MPR is there. We're not contesting that. But then, if you're risky, I won't give you money just because the MPR says 10%. So even if the government chooses to bring the MPR to 2%, and the private sector comes, and the public sector comes, the public sector is still less risky as compared to the private sector. And even within the world of the private sector, there are more risky ventures as compared to another. Yeah. So if you come and the commercial bank, for instance, perceive you to be very risky, they might still charge you at 20%, even if MPR is 2%. So my point is, we can be hopeful that the MPR is going to come down, but it's a really weak indicator. We might not really see the significant decrease in bank loan rates when even MPR comes down, because that is not the main thing that actually determines the rate at which commercial banks is going to give you money. If you're private sector, for instance.
Well, a lot of people are, the naira has stabled for some time now, and in fact, it has stabilized for some time now. But the people are still concerned. The stability of the naira is totally a function of intervention by the CBN, and it is not the true position or the true value of the naira if it is left to find its own values. How long do we keep stabilizing the naira on that ground?
Okay, and this is still my own opinion. I feel that it's a case of you having malaria and you are not, you keep treating it with drugs, but you're not preventing mosquitoes from coming in. Meaning you keep on having this malaria, but you keep on spending money on treating it. I think until Nigeria as an economy can actually be a more producing economy than expanding economy, we keep on having this problem. We are so dollar reliant in this economy that when dollar coughs, we catch cold. So government will always be there to always provide intervention. I feel government, I don't want to really use government because the onus is on all of us. We should be more sensitized to actually be a producing nation rather, because when we produce so much, we have much more to export. When you export, you have dollar coming in without government intervene. But here in this economy, we are more like, we buy this, buy that, shop, we are spenders. And right here from our educational point of view, we are taught that once you get out of school, you get a job. Nobody is teaching you entrepreneurship, really. Nobody is teaching you how to produce. When you don't produce, how do you want to get? You keep on spending. So that is the challenge, and I think we need to treat that from our, of course, people will say that entrepreneurship is not easy. Yeah, we agree. So if government can actually provide enabling environments, like fix the power sector, like cost of electricity going down, the road network is good. I mean, give enabling environment for businesses to actually thrive. People will come into business, they will employ more people, then they can be able to export things, then we can get dollar coming in from various sources. Then we might not be needing government to actually bail us out on dollar, because once they borrowed Eurobond at 9%, 8% rather, to actually stop giving out, issuing T-bill at 18% to attract foreign investors. Okay, so this fund, once it's finished, are they going out to borrow again? So we keep on borrowing and borrowing to feed what? They need to teach us how to fish, and they should stop giving us fish. And the way they can teach us how to fish is to actually create environments for us to fish successfully. And that
really is majorly the challenge. I was about to ask that question, that how does a nation become a producing nation if the government is not keeping its end of the bargain, its responsibilities for the people, and then MSMEs, which are the highest employer of labor in any country, do not get enough support, especially when it comes to getting credit from commercial banks, because the attack has been risky. You understand? So, well, really, what should be the focus now? You've already said that, let's put MPR aside, but what to be done? Because the government keeps borrowing as well, and there are the amenities there are not even good enough for businesses to thrive, and that is why Nigeria lost many international companies to neighboring countries.
Okay, the CBN, the Bank of Industry, they're trying to give out loans that the rates are pretty lower than commercial banks, you know, which is good. But at the end of the day, when a business owner, entrepreneurs gets this funding is not the only problem that they encounter in this part of the world. So you have the money you're going to be paying interest on, right? But then you're spending so much on other costs. They should fix electricity, really. If government can take that away, let's have stable power supply. Because if you look at the books and records of companies, you see that a lot of money is being expended on just generating electricity. They should fix that. That is one. But at the end of the day, we don't have to blame government all the time, really. It all boils down to our mindset. Our mindset needs to be refixed, if there's any word like that. We need to move from the perception of being dependent on paid job. Because an average Nigerian believes that the only way out is to get into school, make sure you have a first class or 2-1 or 2-2, get into a bank or all industry, and salary. When you don't even have the mindset to want to be an entrepreneur, how can you be that when government puts everything down that will help you to be it? So it boils down from our perception. It needs to be changed. Then, of course, government has its own perception, has its own job to also do. Then, of course, we need to appeal to banks. Our commercial banks. We know they are there for business, and of course nobody wants to do business and make a loss, right? But they should also help businesses. We know that there are some businesses that will fail. There's nothing anybody can do about that. But those that they feel they can actually help, they shouldn't give us rates that is as good as telling us you're not giving us a loan. If you're giving us rates of 30%, are we doing MMM? I mean, we kind of business want to put that money in and pay interest, then cover all the costs before making profits. You're not encouraging us. Then if you look at Bank of Industry and other intervention funds that are actually giving rates at figures less than 10%, how many people can those money actually take care of? But you see the commercial banks having trillions in their deposits, you know, they keep on collecting money, right? They rather give you 3% or so on your savings account than give you a loan, you know. Why can't they give a loan, even if it's just a particular, you know, this particular fund from a commercial bank's point of view is for businesses. So the whole burden will not just be on CBN intervention fund or on Bank of Industry, you know. So we all have a part to play, from perception to the government, to the fund provider, you understand, and even to the business owners that are already established, right? Some of them can actually do things without waiting for government. If you, for instance, are in, you're in a business where you can actually construct roads, you can afford it because you actually use this road. You probably have trucks that are plying this road. Corporate social responsibility, you might want to repair some roads and take the burden of government. So some people say, why do you have to do that? You can do it. Some of them are actually tax deductible for the sake of government instead of having to wait. That's that. And if you can also establish funds to actually bring up other entrepreneurs also in the community, instead of having to leave everything for government, you can also do that, you know. Then for those companies, there are some companies that their byproducts become waste. They create more problems to the government. So the money that the government is using to fix waste disposal, they can actually put it into some other things. So if companies that are already in establishment, if they look at all the processes and they see places that they can actually help out, maybe by doing something or not doing something, they should also do so.
All right. Talking about corporate social responsibility, companies, few companies came together in Apapa to construct roads that we have heard. But when it comes to CSR, it is not backed by law. It is the issue of choice and option. So people can't really depend on, you can't hold anybody accountable for...
It's an appeal.
It's okay. Now let's get into the issue of agriculture now. Agriculture is seen as the largest employer of labor. It still has a great potential to, you know, stimulate this economy if people really go into it. Now, from that window of trying to, because that's the easiest, quicker way of getting people or Nigerians to, you know, become productive. What would you advise in the area of using agriculture as a stimulant factor for the economy and even for the inflation and all of that we've been talking about? Okay,
I'll still go back to the education sector, okay? So, people that are already out, already working, it might be difficult for you to tell them to leave their paid job and go into agriculture, especially when we perceive agric now as a crude kind of job. We don't see it as a white-collar kind of job. But for those still passing through education, let's pick it from that point. Maybe subsidy on school fees could be given to people that actually want to study agric and agric-related courses. Some universities are already doing that to actually encourage people to go into such courses. Then you need to sensitize them that agric is a noble job. You know, sometimes it's about perception. You see some people, they want to work in the bank. They didn't even know what they do in banks. But the fact that people wear suits and wear shirts, everybody wants to be there, wants to work in oil company. Oh, where do you work? I work at XYZ oil company. Oh, there's this perception. So sometimes people want to work because they feel that a particular line of job is elitist. So there should be a way that agriculture can be made to not look local, not look like you're backwards, you know. They should make it look like it's a real job. They should make them feel like they're actually impacting the economy. The real, how important agric is, just like how important banking is to the economy. Then, of course, to those already there, CBN, there's a fund. I don't know how easy it is to access it, but I feel there should be more avenues for funds.
That's the anchor borrower.
Yeah, there should be more avenues for funds to be available to people that are actually interested in going into agric. And if it is possible for the rates to also be lower than maybe 7%, you know, there could be that too. Then, of course, there's the empowerment. There is the knowledge gap. So I want to go into a particular kind of agric, and I don't even have an idea, and I don't even know where I'm supposed to get this kind of training, you know. Establishments can be actually put in place, you know, for people to actually go, maybe cost-free, you know, so that you can learn how to do this, learn how to do that. Then you can be given money for you to do it, and maybe like without paying interest for a particular point in time for you to actually make your mistake and come back, and you're not so much under pressure as to, oh, I need to make this work, something you're just getting experience on, and I need to pay this this loan. So I feel after...
To remove the pressure.
A pressure on them. So I feel with all this and some other initiatives, of course, we can now go back to agric being the major, source of income for the economy.
All right, Olayemi Akonde, business investment consultant, thank you very much for coming on the program.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you so much.
All right, so we'll go on a short break now. When we return, we'll be looking at President Buhari's approval of the $1.1 billion for, arming the military. Stay with us.